Welcome to Camp Chaos, where we celebrate the wild ride of modern womanhood.
Join us as we dish on motherhood, life's ups and downs, and all things pop culture that we know you want to talk about.
With special guests and expert insights, we're here to empower you through the chaos of everyday life.
Consider this your ultimate escape from the hustle and bustle. And as always, parental guidance suggested.
Camp is now in session.
Today, we have Dr. Tanya, pediatrician from Calabasas Pediatrics Wellness Center. Dr. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on.
We're so excited. You're actually our first pediatrician on the podcast, which is shocking. We have all we talk about is kids and mom stuff and doctor stuff all day long. But this is our first. We were talking yesterday. We're like, where do we start and where do we end with Tanya? Because there's so much we could talk about. And especially that you're from a wellness practice as pediatrics. I'm personally so excited to hear so much about your practice.
Whatever you want to ask me, I am here for you.
Well, we thought today we would just cover, because like Kendra said, you're our first pediatrician. While we would love to keep you here for 5 hours, we realize that we can't. So we want to talk about the most controversial topics that we kind of deal with as moms to younger babies and toddlers, and just kind of get some clarity and answers, because I feel like there's so much research on the internet and on social media that we're trying to decipher through. And so to have someone like you with such authority and you know over the subject matter, that we would love to get into some controversial topics. So,
and I feel too, it depends on whose Instagram or phone you're on, but one person can say one thing. If you open her Instagram, it'll probably say something completely different of what you should do with your kids than if you open mine. So having someone with some authority on actually I went to medical school and I am a pediatrician would be great.
Definitely. And what's funny is I find that if I post a video on something medical on Instagram versus TikTok, the different responses I get to, because they're totally different patient populations.
Oh my God, Dr. Tanya, TikTok is the wild west. They are so ruthless on there. I mean, they're great, but sometimes I'm woo, I need a meditation exercise after being on TikTok. Okay, so let's get into the first. Really, I think, I guess actually this is a very heavy one, but we all know that there's very different views as far as the CDC recommendations of what you should do at your well checks. If you have a mom that comes in that's got questions, how do you approach that?
Definitely. So in my practice, I have the luxury of really spending a full hour with patients at their Wellchild visits. So we delve into everything. I'm very big on nutrition and mindfulness and sleep and, lifestyle. So I want to know what your kids are eating for breakfast, what they're eating for snacks, how they're sleeping, what your bedtime routine is, how they're doing in school. If they're not doing well, why? Let's talk about that. And so unfortunately, I think in today's hurried insurance-based practices, a lot of that wellness stuff gets lost, right? And they don't have time for that. So they're boom, boom, boom. And I think that's where a lot of the questions and concerns come up is, how do I have time to really get to know my provider and have them answer all my questions? So I am always available for my families. They have a cell phone. They can reach me 24/7. And so, yes, we talk about, everything that you need to raise a healthy child. And that can be from, what's in the foods that they're eating to the air they're breathing. Air quality is a big thing right now since I'm in the Calabasas area. And I've been talking to a lot of the families in the schools about if your kids can be outside and how long. And then also, as I'm sure you're wondering, their vaccines, right? That's something that we also talk about at every visit, and which ones are most important and how's your child feeling today? Because we only want to give them if your child is super duper healthy today. And if there's any hint that they're getting sick, then I'd rather have you come back and do this, on a different day. But I do think they are important to prevent so many diseases and illnesses that we don't see anymore, such as meningitis and polio and things like that.
I think that's such a big conversation that we're not going to spend, this entire episode talking about, but I think it's worth, even though we could and should, I think it's worth acknowledging that a lot of moms this is such a polarizing subject that have so many different views when it comes to disease prevention measures. How do you approach it if a mom is coming to you and saying maybe they don't agree with you, or they don't agree with the CDC schedule, they want to delay, or they want to completely defer for a while? How do you approach that with a family?
Definitely. And I feel like, that's why it's really important to interview your pediatrician before you join as a family and, find someone that's sort of like minded as you. And it's okay if, you don't always agree, but you should be able to have a discussion and learn. And ultimately, if families, don't agree with what I feel is best for their family, they shouldn't be coming to my practice, right? They should be able to choose somebody else. So that's something we usually talk about ahead of time. And I always tell parents, listen, I'm never going to force you to give any vaccine to your child that you don't want. This is a discussion. I'm going to tell you what I think is best. Now, in certain states like California, there's also rules that you have to follow, right? And if you want to go to daycare, preschool, or school, you have to have certain vaccines. And we're going to talk about that. And so if that isn't something that you want to do, then unfortunately you may not be able to go to these schools or live in that state. And that's not my decision there.
Yeah, that's
but
much
my boys
bigger
are
than
all
the
fully
three of us.
vaccinated. Yes.
I am curious on your take on this because, we grew up, we're like, 90s babies. And when we were children, like we would go and go to our well checks. And it was like a very short list, I feel like, compared to what is now a very long list. What is your take on that? Do you think it's like they're more research? Do you think like there's so many? And I'm curious as a doctor because you probably have had kids and have gone through whether it was 10 years ago or versus now. But I feel like every year we turn around and there's just so many new ones. Like there's an RSV that's being tested now. Like there's constantly these new recommendations. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I'm a mom as well. I have 3 boys. My oldest is 19 and my youngest is 9. So I have the widespread there. And my boys were all fully vaccinated. They're all very healthy. They're all very, I feel, well adjusted and happy. And I definitely like to, practice what I preach in terms of wellness and nutrition and sleep and mindfulness and all of that, with my family. And I've learned a lot from them. My kids aren't perfect, right? And that's how we learn. That's how I got into integrative ADHD, because one of my boys needed more of that. And I'm proud to say that he is doing really, really well right now. It's interesting because we are protecting against more illnesses and diseases now with vaccines. But if you look at most of the vaccines, they have changed over the years. So, for example, the DTaP vaccine that I got when I was a child had like over 2,000 proteins in it, and now it only has less than 5. So most of the vaccines are a lot more purified and less strong on the immune system than when I was young. So even though we're protecting against more things, overall it is fewer and it is less in terms of what we're giving our kids now compared to the antigens back when I was younger. That said, there's also things that aren't vaccines anymore. You mentioned RSV Beyfortus. That's actually not an immunization. It's a monoclonal antibody shot to protect babies during the 6 months when they're most vulnerable during the winter. And I've actually really been pleased at how well that is working and how we're really not seeing, I'm really not seeing side effects from it. But again, it's a choice. We discuss it with families. We talk about their history, about if they had an older child that ended up in the hospital from RSV, they often want to protect their younger child. And if they're home and they're not in daycare and they're not going anywhere, they may not need it. I saw a family from Singapore the other day and I learned something. They said, we don't have winter in Singapore.
Yeah.
Did you know that? So they don't really have RSV and flu season in Singapore. So the parents decided it wasn't something that they needed. They're going to be going back there in 2 months. And that's totally fine.
It's not
we
a one
discuss
size
it and learn
fits
all
all.
about it. And
I feel like that's an interesting way to approach your practice because I think so many of these doctors you go to now and they just kind of like slap the book at you and they're like, this is what we do. This is routine. And I love that you take an approach where it's not a one size fits all and you're going to really work of the holistic health of the family. Like how you're saying with sleep. I mean, I feel like that's such a hot topic with any of us as moms and it's never going to be perfect. And just when you think it is, it's like, no, all of a sudden they're up and awake. So how do you approach sleep? And like when you say sleep, I'm very curious of what your thoughts are on sleep training, which is also a very controversial topic. Talk to us about what you think of the health of sleep as a family.
Yeah, I mean, I think sleep is very critical to overall health and wellness and disease and illness prevention. Kids also grow when they're sleeping, which I love to tell elementary school kids. Did you know that you grow when you're sleeping at night? And that always helps them, want to sleep more and get better with their sleep routine when we're talking about it. I do think that sleep habits are established when you're young. And so I think starting to create when you have a baby, and Taylor, you have one coming up, so we can talk about this now. I think With the infants, I love to try to get them on a sleep schedule as soon as possible, but that is different for every single person and every single family. So I always say to parents, what is your goal? Is your goal to get your child sleeping through the night as soon and as long as possible? Or are you a family where you all want to sleep together and wake up every few hours? Hey, I don't judge if you want to be on an every 3 hour sleep schedule for the first few years. Personally, I think it's safer and healthier to kind of work on the goal of getting your baby sleeping through the night by 6 months of age. And I think in most cases that is totally doable. We structure the feeding so we're feeding more during the day. We're being calm at night. We have a nighttime routine. Everything's dark. Everything's cool when babies wake up at night. Shh, we don't have a big party. We feed them. We put them back to sleep. We teach them how to put themselves to sleep at night. So when they wake up in the middle of the night, they can soothe themselves back to sleep. And I think these are all really important skills because you want to have a preschooler and a kindergartner that when it's nighttime, you do your routine. You say, mommy loves you. And they soothe themselves to sleep and they sleep all night long. And so I think these are habits that we can instill in our older infants from a young age. And when you start young, it's so much easier. My my almost 10-year-old, he turns 10 in a few days. We just went through the fires and my husband was out of town and it was just us. So yes, I let him sleep with me for a few nights because we had so much chaos going around us with the winds and the fire chiefs and everything. And then when that all settled down and my husband came back, he was able to go back to his own room, no problem. It's the 80-20 rule, right? If you can have your kids on this wellness schedule for 80% of the time, then when you stay out later for one night or your routine changes, they will get back to those habits. But if they never have that strong foundation, it's a lot more challenging and harder for everybody when there are things that, are thrown at you, along the way. And it's the title of your podcast, right? Life's are chaotic with kids. But in that chaos, you want to have some semblance of routine and peace and wellness. So that way your kids can function, on their own when needed.
Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit on co-sleeping you mentioned. I mean, we haven't had a huge conversation about it on the podcast, but I know it is what some people prefer to do. Is there any advice you give to people on the best practices for co-sleeping or how to be healthy and successful if you're choosing that route?
So, I do feel that the safe sleep guidelines, are there for a reason. And I know there are plenty of cultures where they do co-sleep and the babies do fine. And so when parents come into my practice, I'll say, listen, I do feel the safest way for your baby to sleep is in their own safe sleep environment. And that can be a co-sleeper. It can be a bassinet next to the bed that rolls onto, that flips onto your bed. And there's a lot of different things out there. That said, I want you to be open and honest with me. I want to know what you're doing as a family because I want to help you, with whatever that is. And so when I have families that are co-sleeping, we will, talk about certain things like make sure that, that everyone who is sleeping in the bed, that no one's taking any medication or having any substances that might affect the way they are sleeping near their child, that hopefully there is still a safe space in the bed so you can't accidentally roll over or a blanket can't go onto your child. I mean, as a pediatrician, I have to tell you, I have seen some really horrible things, and I've worked in the ICU at UCLA and I've seen babies, unfortunately, that had not great outcomes because a parent rolled over or a blanket flipped up over them or they got stuck in a crack. And so we want to prevent any unhealthy or potentially tragic or dangerous situation. That said, I don't want parents to come in and lie to me and tell me they're doing things they're not because I want to know what they're doing. And I want to be able to have these conversations with my families. So yes, my boys did sleep in their own safe sleep environment. And you know what? I'm a super light sleeper. And I remember at a few nights of age, I couldn't sleep with them in a bassinet next to me, making all that noise. So I moved them to the room next to me. I didn't have a big house. I could hear them when they woke up and I could still go nurse them and put them back to sleep. And that was the way that we all slept better. And I do feel that babies sleep through the night sooner when they're not right next to you and you can't hear every little but that's not for everybody. And so tell me what you want, what your goals are, and let's work towards you having a family that can, live the lifestyle and way that you want and your kids can be healthy and safe.
Dr. Tanya, can I ask, are you a concierge doctor then?
I am.
You are. Okay. Because I'm I heard you say give cell phone out, spend an hour of time. All of these things are unfortunately, our system is just not designed for that kind of service that you're giving. So I'm like, there's got to be some hook.
And that's the problem, right? So I spent 15 years in a busy insurance-based practice where we took all insurances. And I felt like I was letting every family down. I wanted more time with them. I wanted them to be able to reach out to me at night. I wanted them not to worry. I wanted to be able to answer their questions. And I couldn't make all that happen in the insurance-based system that we have, which is so tight and short and doesn't allow for these, relationships and really all the critical thinking that I feel that you should do as a physician. So I did jump ship when my third was born. And I get it, it's not for everybody. And I think our system is so broken in the United States, and I don't know how to fix it. So I spend every day working around it. But I do think we need reform, and it's so hard, and it's so unfortunate that doctors who take insurance are forced to have 2,000, 3,000 patients and can't really get to know them well and can't spend more than 10 minutes with them. And I don't know how to fix the system. I've tried. So instead, I just try to work around it for really what's best for my families.
Well, I feel like that's very smart. And I also feel like it's kind of odd because we're at this point in the United States where like we've never been sicker in a way. There's so many kids, like, I don't know, I think it's 1 in 27 boys has autism now. It's the staggering results of what we're at in the medical community versus like what you guys have to do to get around just being able to sit and talk to your patients in order for you guys to make a living and for it to be worth it for you. I mean, you guys go to medical school. It's actually very scary of how are we such a developed country with all of these kids so sick, all these kids with autoimmune, ADHD, autism, yet we can't get more than 10 minutes with our doctor. It's alarming. Like, how is this our reality?
It is so sad. And I think the pendulum, is swinging, and people are realizing that we have to clean up our food system. We have to get rid of the food dyes. In California, we've actually been making a lot of progress, right? And I just saw this morning the FDA banned one of the red food dyes, which is a start. It's a small start, but we have a lot.
Okay, well, Tanya, we get excited about this. We get so excited, but this is like years away. So yes, it's banned, but like companies have years before it's actually removed. So I feel like, and I'm hoping and praying that come RFK, who I'm such a big fan of, that he's going to come in and be like, no, we need to make an automatic. It can't be this like slow snail pace of removing these dyes from our food. There's no reason to have all these dyes. Like why? To make it more attractive for kids to be addicted to them? Like what is the reason?
I mean, there isn't a reason, and we really don't need them. And that's why, when I'm working on cleaning up a family's diet and nutrition, I often say, you could shop at only Trader Joe's. They don't allow artificial colors at Trader Joe's. So anything you start by buying there, and I don't have any relationship with them, is healthier than what you would buy in other places. Also, anything you make at home is going to be healthier than what you buy. You want to try to shop the perimeter of the grocery store, less processed, less preservatives. And I think we're kind of getting back to that now. Things that your grandparents wouldn't recognize, you don't want to be serving your kids. We're also learning more about the gut microbiome. I was involved in a lot of research out of UC Davis 10 years ago on how the infant gut microbiome was changed through generational decline of the infant-specific gut bacteria that babies need. And we know that this is what is, low levels of this is associated with more allergies, autoimmune issues. And so supplementing babies, especially C-section babies, with good probiotics, human milk oligosaccharides that are in the breast milk, and all of that, can really help make a difference. But it's going to be a long process. And research is slow and data is slow, especially when you don't have companies supporting it, right? Who's going to support research on healthy whole nutrition? So we're trying
where the money
to make progress.
follows.
It is slow.
I think, unfortunately, at the end of the day, so much of this is you start to realize it's just a business and it's a profit, which is so scary because as moms, and I feel like as you become a mother, you become more aware of so many different things and more curious, which is wonderful, but it's also could be a very dark, slippery slope of what you go through. And even antibiotics, you're talking about the gut. Like my daughter's had an ear, I took her to urgent care and they're like, oh, it's an ear infection, give her an antibiotic. And my gut, no pun intended, was saying, I don't feel like it's an ear infection. luckily I have a wonderful pediatrician that I'm able to text. She said, go to this pediatrician or at PM in Tustin. It's a great urgent care. They looked and they're like, this is not an ear infection. Do not give her an antibiotic. We're so happy to overprescribe antibiotics. And it's almost like you get your ticket when you come through the door of, here you go, here's your antibiotic. This will cure it. But we're destroying these little babies, young babies' guts right away with antibiotics that aren't necessary. And of course, there's going to be a time and a place when they are, and life-saving antibiotics, absolutely. But I just feel like we're so happy to overprescribe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's why having a good relationship with your pediatrician as you do is so important, because the system gets fragmented when you're going to this urgent care and this ER and no one's keeping track and saying, wait, how did your child have 5 ear infections in the last year? Are they all separate infections? Is it one infection that never cleared up? Is there anything else going on? Is there, inflammation in the nasal passages and sinuses? Is the adenoid enlarged? Is the fluid being trapped? And so I think that's it's great that we have so much access to care and you can go to different urgent cares and minute clinics and ERs. But if all the records aren't going to one pediatrician to really evaluate and take a look at your child and see what's going on, that's where sometimes things, slip through the cracks. And is your child on a good probiotic if they're getting so many antibiotics? And not only are they on a good probiotic, but is their gut getting all that healthy, high fiber food that the good gut bacteria need to proliferate and stay and colonize the gut?
I think the food conversation is really interesting, especially because as moms, you kind of like go back to the very beginning. You not necessarily like at our age, we're just, we try to be healthy, but we're just eating whatever. But when you go to your kids, it's like, well, my kids have only had breast milk. Like, let me look at what the first thing is that I'm introducing them to. A lot of moms with babies will try to decide between baby-led weaning versus just regular spoon feeding. Like, what is your recommendation? Is there a better route? Is a combination the best? Like, what's the best to set up our babies for like a healthy food habit moving forward?
Yeah, and I would say you don't have to choose, right? Everybody feels like they have to decide A or B.
Right.
And really the goal is getting your child to eat real food, healthy food, whole food at a young age. Some babies can eat pieces at 6 months. Some can only handle purees, and that's okay. It doesn't matter to me if you're fork mashing or pureeing that banana or sweet potato, or you're letting them gnaw on soft pieces of yours, as long as they're getting real whole foods. And there are plenty of baby food companies out there that are clean label tested that have super low appropriate levels of, everything that we're trying to avoid. Did you know that baby food now in California has to be tested for heavy metals?
Thank God.
And that the results have to be listed on the manufacturer's website. This is something that we've been working on for a while.
But is that not so crazy that like, why are they putting heavy, like it's so mind boggling that it's wild, right?
So heavy metals are in everything, right? You look at a sweet potato that's grown, the sweet potato in the grocery store should have the same level as what's in the baby food or what you make at home. That's the goal. But it's not going to be zero. It's impossible to be zero. All fruits and vegetables have some because they're grown in our soil. They're grown in the ground. But the standards we have now may be higher than needed, and sometimes inadvertently in processing and food manufacturing, other things can seep in, and that's what we want to try to prevent. I've been talking to baby food manufacturers. Is there a way to chelate out heavy metals? Why do they have to be in there? And unfortunately, it is very complicated, and you can't, because that would affect the nutrition. So we're sort of stuck with this very low level, but we want to make sure it's as low as possible. And that's why I really like the Clean Label Project. And if you're buying any packaged foods, supplements, anything out there, infant formula, Clean Label certified. These are companies that go above and beyond already to have a third party pulling products off the shelves and testing them to make sure that they qualify for the lowest possible level of toxins and plasticizers and pesticides and heavy metals and other things that we really don't want our kids to be exposed to.
Okay, so I know that our listeners are going to be so upset if we do not ask this question, since we're talking so much about food. What are your favorite formulas, and like whether that's like baby led or like the pouches, like any baby food, like what are your favorite companies and who's doing the best job in our clean ingredients?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, full disclosure, I was one of the pediatricians that really got involved during the infant formula shortage a few years ago and worked with the FDA on we have to allow high quality international infant formulas into our supply because we don't have enough here to feed our babies in the country. And there are a lot of countries like Australia and Europe that are doing things that really well, right? They are making whole milk, clean label, high quality infant formulas. And let's take a look at them. And during this process, I was working on Operation Fly Formula and I started consulting with Aussie Bubs, which is one of my favorite infant formula companies from Australia. I also helped get goat milk infant formula approved in the United States. And there are several companies that are doing amazing jobs now using whole milk based cow and goat dairy, high quality with all the things you want in them and not the things that you don't for your infant. So I think it's great that we have much more transparency in our system now. We have a lot more product options in our country. And I hope this stays. I know they're all working on their FDA trials right now, which is a lot. It's expensive, it's cumbersome, but they're doing everything that they need to do to stay here in the United States to help our families. So I think when you're looking to choose an infant formula, if you're not able to breastfeed, if you decide you want to supplement, I think there are a lot of options now that you can talk to your pediatrician about. Whenever possible, I do prefer whole milk dairy. I think using that whole milk dairy base instead of the non-fat base has so many benefits of that natural whole complete lipid complex. There's also fewer oils that need to be added for those extra essential fatty acids that babies need for brain development. So I think that's one thing you can look at.
Okay, so what do you think about raw milk?
So I do have concerns about raw milk right now, especially with the bird flu going around, and we are seeing more and more of that. I think there is a reason why milk is safety tested, is pasteurized, and especially with the young kids, I think right now with the contamination in our supply, it is important that you are extremely cautious with raw milk, and I really try to avoid it right now.
Especially for the kids. I mean, if they get sick from that, it's scary.
Yeah, and we know that there's bird flu right now, and we're working on trying to fix that. But it's a thing in our raw milk supply, and so pasteurization does kill bird flu, E. coli, listeria, and all the other things that we're that could be concerning and make kids sick. So I would say right now I would put a hold on that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's such a social media hype where I couldn't breastfeed either kids. I tried and I never had a milk supply. So for both, I got donor milk from my friends, which I was so grateful. I'm like, I'll never be able to thank them enough for that. And then I went to goat's milk for my kids. But when it was time to switch to like regular whole milk, I saw so much on the internet, which I'm sure you get this frustration with your patients, or maybe it's just me, crazy cuckoo mama, that you feel like you're Dr. Google and you're like, you do not have a medical degree, but you get influenced by all these people. And it's like, oh, raw milk is best. And my pediatrician was the same. She's like, it's not worth the infection. Stick to whole milk for brain development. Absolutely. Don't go to 2% or, But I do think that there's this Instagram, TikTok, social media pressure for moms that at the end of the day, you want what's best for your kid. And you get all inundated with all this information that you're like, is this the right information? Or where do you, I guess, kind of draw the line of you have to stick to what your doctor's saying?
Well, I think above all, you have to be safe, right? And so I'm a big fan of goat milk based infant formula and even goat milk for older kids. There's nothing wrong with that. I personally don't like the taste, but if you do, as long as it's pasteurized and fortified, right? I mean, any milk that is not fortified is going to be lacking in vitamin D and other nutrients that toddlers and young kids need. But I think there are ways that you can buy safe other sources of milk to help supplement your child. And again, it's about the whole diet, right? You want to make sure your child's getting enough whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, low fat, healthy foods, and enough healthy fats like avocado and olive oil and all of that stuff too. And so it's about a balance. It's not about, eat this, don't eat this. And so when I get these calls from the families, I'm like, okay, we got to look at your whole diet. And then we also have to figure out what supplements your child needs. It's hard for a lot of young kids to get everything they need through diet alone. As much as we want you to get all of your vitamins and minerals through diet alone, it can be challenging. And so a lot of my patients need extra omegas. They may need magnesium. They almost all need vitamin D. Some need, vitamin A, and these are just, there's so many things that you really have to take a good diet history on to really look at, or bring in a good dietitian. I have some pediatric dietitians who I love, who also help me with my picky eaters, my families who might be anemic, or who have certain food preferences, right? If you have a vegan family or a vegetarian family, you're gonna have to work even harder on ensuring that child is getting everything they need.
I have like 2 more questions on food really quick before we move. Allergens. Do you recommend introducing them early? And I remember like my daughter had, when I introduced her to eggs, like would get a little bit of a hive breakout on her chin. But then my pediatrician said, just, keep doing it. And then it went away. But I have another friend who right now is like experiencing hives with eggs. She just did regular, she just started introducing formula. The baby's breaking out in hives. So when is the best time to do allergens and how do we approach them?
Yeah, so I think the research now is pretty clear that early allergen introduction can decrease the risk of allergies later on. So I'm a big believer in introducing all the high allergenic foods early if it's safe and if your child is doing okay. So that means you do want to get in eggs early. I love scrambled eggs. They're soft pieces. You can't choke on them at an early age. Yogurt, whole milk dairy is important. Nut butters mixed into oatmeal, yogurt, the peanut butter puffs like the Bamba from Israel, all of that early. But when your child does have a reaction, that's when things can get tricky, right? So you mentioned the rash on the chin. So babies can actually get a contact rash too, sometimes from eating food, which is different than a full IgE mediated allergic reaction in their body. Whereas when you put it in their mouth and don't touch the skin, are they getting hives? And it can be tricky to figure out. Eggs specifically is something that, we may say if the reaction is very low, we want to introduce you to tiny, tiny amounts slowly over time to get your body used to it. So the thought of, you have a tiny reaction, let's hold off now and not give it and your child gets older. We don't do that very often anymore, but it can be very tricky and nuanced. So it is important that you work with your pediatrician or your allergist because food allergies can be life-threatening. So if something is very serious, we may not want you to keep giving it to your child.
And then what do you say to families like me who have pickier eaters? Like my toddler is pretty picky. I mean, he eats a really well-balanced diet, but like every night is really grilled chicken and fruit, which is great, but he doesn't have a lot of exposure. Yeah, no vegetables, but like fish, like, nothing really. He's just my picky guy and he likes what he likes and he'll eat it great, what he likes, but it's just, he's picky. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that for most kids, if you expose them early to a wide variety of foods and you try to keep away a lot of the processed artificial foods that sort of change the way their brain thinks about food. Like if the first chicken a child eats is a nugget, they're going to think, gosh, this is what chicken's supposed to taste like. And it's really hard to go back to grilled chicken. So I think the first thing is exposing them early on to a wide variety and trying to keep your house a healthy, safe place. That said, some kids are more picky, right? And it's not their fault. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. So let's work with what they like and see how we can expand that. So grilled chicken and fruit every night for dinner is not bad, right? I mean, you're giving him real whole food, protein, fruit. So let's try to get him involved in maybe going to the farmer's market and choosing a veggie that he can help you prepare in the kitchen. He doesn't even have to eat it. He can prepare it. He can serve it to the rest of the family. It can sit on a plate next to his plate, not even on his plate. But the more that you expose him and get him involved in working with this vegetable item, the sooner he will actually decide like, hey, one day I do want to try it. I also love to tell young kids that their taste buds change every day. I say, do you know as you get older, your taste buds change every day? And so tomorrow, maybe something that you didn't like last month actually won't be as bad tomorrow. And then in 2 months, when you turn 3, you might actually like it. So keep trying it. And one day your taste buds are going to be like mommies and daddies, and you're going to like things that they do, like that they like as well. And so really the key is to not take it out of their diet and their life. So one of the mistakes I see parents make is they'll come in for a kindergarten visit and I'll say, tell me about the vegetables you're eating. Oh, they don't like vegetables, so we don't serve them and buy them anymore because it's a waste. Okay, well, then your child's never going to go back to eating those vegetables, right? So you still need to buy them and prepare them and put them on the table and let them see you eat them. Even if they don't eat them, it's okay. If they're exposed to it, I promise you they will go back to eating them in the future.
I do
that's
feel
great
like
advice.
it's a really big thing of what you're mirroring. Like I got very lucky with my kids. However, like at 6 months, I handed them a lamb chop and like I was a little bit, I did purees too, but I wanted them to eat whole foods. Like they eat salmon skin. Like I got very lucky, but I also do think it's like what they watch, what I eat. Like they'll eat like sardines out of a can. Like they're like, so super lucky, I will say. But like I eat tons of salads, and my son, like every maybe once a week, he's like, I want to try that. Like I want a salad. And like he'll try it and he'll spit it out. But like he keeps saying, because he sees me do it, so he wants to mimic that. So I do feel like it's so much of what I know. I appreciate you saying it's not your fault of picky eaters, but I feel like it's so much of like they want to mirror, and they mirror what they're watching you do.
You're absolutely right. And as a parent, you're the best role model for your child. And I think that's so amazing. I love my families that eat sardines. I have to say, my family doesn't.
Yeah,
and I
don't.
can't myself,
Like,
and my
I got
kids
lucky.
don't.
My mom did that one. I'm like, serve my kids sardines outside. I'm like gagging, but yeah.
But it is really healthy, and there's so many important healthy omega fatty acids in there. And if you can get your kids into those routines at a young age, it is so good. I remember my oldest, we went to a Jewish preschool where we couldn't send meat. We also couldn't send nuts and nut butters back then because they were worried about allergies. And he would eat mashed salmon on bread sandwich for lunch. Now, my second child would not. He refused. He still doesn't eat fish to this day. So you do, everybody is a little different, but you do want to work with them and try to expand their palate as much as you can. And as long as they're exposed, they will go back to it. I promise.
And I think
you,
that's the
even if
biggest
it's when
thing. You
they're
just don't
a
give up, because it is so frustrating. And like we go to the farmer's market every week, and like it is $7 for a small basket of strawberries right now. So it's very frustrating when you're buying food that just ends up on the floor or gets thrown away. So I think persistence is very important, and try to get over like how frustrating it is watching it get wasted.
Shifting gears really quick before we have to let you go, I would love to hear your thoughts on discipline. I think both of us with toddlers, and then we have the little babies, we are certainly in the discipline mode or learning and trying to do it. And I know that there's a ton of different methods, but maybe just to start, like a timeout versus positive reinforcement. Like what is your take? Where have you seen success? How can we set our babies up for success?
Help.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to choose one or the other, right? The important thing is consistency. So I think the best thing you can do is set your house up for your kids to have success. For example, if you're always fighting with your child because they are grabbing the remote control, then why is it within their reach, right? So you want to try to set up the house so you're not saying, no, 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 don't touch that. Give them a safe area. It doesn't have to be a big area where they can play and explore and do what they want. And then role model the good and positive behavior, with them. Praise them when they're doing things right. And when they're doing things not right, like they're hitting you, let's say, okay, no, we don't hit in our house. We do soft touch. We give mommy kisses. And the other thing is you want to make sure that, that you're role modeling that good behavior too. So you don't want them to see you throwing things, saying bad words. Like I hate all the videos online where parents post their kids saying cuss words. I personally think that's horrible. And I think we should be teaching our kids how to speak politely and appropriately. It doesn't mean that things might slip out once in a while. But if you don't expose your kids to inappropriate language at a young age, it won't become part of their language, right? And again, maybe this is just, my personal view. And a lot of people don't like when I say that. But to me, there are ways to be appropriate and ways to not be appropriate. And you don't want your kids to do or say the wrong things when they're out in public, when they're in school, when they get a job in the future. Funny story is I had one parent, and we were big into camping growing up. We learned how to go to the bathroom in the wilderness, right? But one family also let her kids go to the bathroom in the front yard when they got home every day. Okay, that's fine. But then as teenagers, they're still going to the bathroom in inappropriate places. So at some point, you have to teach your kids what's right and what's
somewhere.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're camping, if you're on a long car ride, of course we do things, for survival. But no, you can't go to the bathroom on the
Norm.
playground at school in the corner. That becomes not appropriate, and we need to teach our kids what's
Well,
right and what's
I
wrong.
feel like we're at that age where like 3, it's like cute if like, oh, it's funny that they do this, or you could like laugh at it. But then at some point it becomes not cute and it becomes a problem, whether that's bad language, whether that's behaviors like peeing outside. Like you can't have the 10-year-old that's at a birthday party that's peeing in the bush. Like that's go use the potty. Like there's just things that cute line ends very quickly. But it's hard to tell them, oh, that's not cute anymore. It was cute yesterday. Now you have to stop.
Right. And so the more that you guide them as they're growing up, the less you have to use discipline. But I do think discipline is really important. And I like to turn so many scenarios into a learning lesson. I mean, like I said, my kids aren't perfect. They've all made mistakes. And I love when they make mistakes and they do stupid things, even when they're older, middle school or high school, because we get to sit down as a family and discuss, was that the best choice you made? What could you have done differently? How do we need to make this right now? And how do we need to apologize to the other person and learn going forward?
I think tantrums are such a big part of our world right now. And I also know that I understand that they are developmentally normal to have tantrums. But I think sometimes as a parent, it can be really overwhelming when, you're on your 4th tantrum of the week and you've tried, you've repeated yourself over and over of trying to be gentle and positive. And it's like, it's not working. How should we be handling tantrums? Like, are we just supposed to this is on us to take them and take them in right now and figure out how to balance our patience and like kind of level out our level of stress and chaos? Or is there something that we should be doing with our babies to help them through their tantrums?
So first thing is you want to make sure they're safe, right? So if there's anything unsafe in the area, you need to take that away or move them. Like, so if they're in the middle of a grocery store, you might have to take them and go to the car and let them have their tantrum and be safe and drive home. I've left a full grocery cart in a grocery store before, right? Because my son had a tantrum when he was younger. And then I thought back about it. I was like, gosh, that was the 3rd errand I took him on of the day. That wasn't really fair for me to try to take a 2-year-old on 3 different errands. That was more for my convenience, not his. Maybe I need to limit it to 1 errand a day now. And so when parents come to me with tantrums, what's the pattern? Is the pattern of the tantrum because they want something that they can't have? What is that item? Is it something safe that they should be playing with or something safe that they shouldn't be playing with? Is it because you left them alone and you weren't paying enough attention with them, So let's try to manage your day. Like, for example, tantrums often happen when you pick your kids up from preschool and you throw them in the car and then you go home and you start doing your own things, right? And you're not paying attention with your kids. So how can we rework that? Maybe let's pick them up with a blanket and a picnic basket and have a quick little 10-minute picnic on the grass outside of preschool so they can have one-on-one time with the parent or caregiver. And then you can put them in the car and go home and say, you know what, mommy's going to set the timer now because I have to do 15 minutes getting ready dinner or whatever it is you're doing. And then we're going to have our playtime again after dinner where you get to choose what we're going to do. And so, those different things, and it's so hard to make a set schedule because every family's routine is different. But I usually try to think about what provoked this tantrum and how can we rewind and maybe prevent it from happening again the next day, because we don't want to keep doing the same thing. And again, sometimes kids need a tantrum. Let it all out. It's okay. Put them in the corner with the pillows. Let them scream and hit them. You can go sit down across the room on the ground with a book and say, I'm going to start reading a book. And if you start calmly reading a book out loud, it's amazing how many of those toddlers and preschoolers will calm down and come and sit in your lap because they want to hear you read that book.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great advice. I have
homework.
One final question, which might be a really hard question before we go, but is there like one piece of parenting advice that you give to all of your parents that I mean, there's like so much advice that we need, but I just feel like to be able to hear from you, a pediatrician, like just some words of encouragement to people like us who are just like in it right now and maybe just need some advice moving forward.
I would say there's going to be good days and there's going to be challenging days. And you can't beat yourself up about that. Every day is not going to be perfect. And there's going to be some days where you're like, I just have to survive today and make sure everybody's alive at the end of the day. And that's okay. And then there's going to be days which are great and you're feeding everyone healthy meals and you're teaching your kids good habits and everything's going well. And it's going to be a mix. There's going to be ups and downs and you can't avoid that. So I think trying to not beat yourself up, try not to feel bad about what you do yesterday. Tomorrow's a new day where you can start fresh and try to make improvements and your kids will be okay.
That's great advice.
Yeah, really good advice. We'll try to take it with us as we go through.
So Dr. Tanya, tell everyone where they can find you.
Sure. So my office website is calabasas.peds.com. drtanya.com is another website. I'm on social media at Dr. Tanya Altmann. Altmann has 2 N's on the end. That's my husband's fault because everyone forgets that. And please reach out, follow me, ask me questions. I try to answer parent questions as much as I can and be available. But if you have a true medical emergency or medical situation or question, it's always best to reach out to your own pediatrician for advice.
Perfect. This was so amazing, Dr.
Thank
Tanya.
you
We're
so much.
Grateful.
Sure. Thank you for having me on, you guys. And congratulations to everything. And Taylor, I can't wait to hear about your little one.
Thank
and
you.
I should send you books. And let me know if I can be of any help. This was fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Camp Chaos. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our show. Connect with us on social media at Camp Chaos Podcast. Until next time, campers.